Last video in my first time reading Bleach series, I think I made it pretty clear how excited I am about the Hollows coming back into the story, and how shocked I was by the truth about Ishin being a Soul Reaper, and how curious I am about the Visored and the Arrancar. So obviously there are some very exciting things starting off this new arc of Bleach. What I loved about these chapters was that while we did get some more setup for the larger threat on the way, we focused more on the fact that the biggest danger might be something much closer to Ichigo. Something from within. I love what Kubo is doing with Ichigo, who's in a very interesting place in the story at this point. He started out this arc in a fairly good position, having become an official substitute Soul Reaper and going back to school with his friends. But the introduction of Shinji and his invitation for Ichigo to join the Visored sets off a bit of a spiral for our hero. Shinji continues his efforts to try to recruit Ichigo and reveals that Ichigo's inner hollow needs to be brought under control, or he's putting all of his friends and family at risk. For a character like Ichigo, whose defining trait is being a protector to the people he loves, this is probably the scariest thing imaginable. The idea that there's something inside of him that he doesn't understand and that could hurt his friends petrifies him. And for the first time so far in the series, we really see a withdrawn Ichigo. He's distant with the people close to him, he's looking depressed and barely able to get out of bed, and he's haunted by a voice only he can hear. His inner hollow. Kubo is building up this threat from within with this great, unsettling, creeping anticipation, like a possession slowly having taken root, and now starting to bubble to the surface. It's important to see our heroes be in these states of mind. It's important to see them struggling with their own doubts and fears and their own anxieties. I love that Kubo isn't afraid to let Ichigo be vulnerable, to make him lay out in bed and have no idea how to go forward. Heroes don't need to be perfect or always have a smile on their face or have an optimistic outlook. Sometimes heroes have to overcome their own mind and their worries to come out stronger on the other side. So I'm glad we're seeing a natural human reaction from our main character, even if it's not the most inspiring thing to see in the moment, but is actually more powerful in the end once we hopefully see him not give in to his own crippling depression. That can be very inspiring for anyone that's going through a difficult time. I've been in rough spots like that, and I'm sure many readers have too. I really respect that we're giving the character the chance in the story space to react like this instead of having him just move forward like nothing is wrong, when these recent revelations would absolutely shake him to his core. I am still so curious about the connection between the Visored and Ichigo, and this notion that there's some kind of hollow within him is fascinating. It explains why his personality was completely different when he wore the mask fighting Byakuya, because it wasn't really him. It also gives us a little more information about the weird, all-white Ichigo that was in his mind during his fight with Kenpachi. Back then, it initially seemed like something Zangetsu had summoned to make a point about understanding the power of his Zanpakuto, but then after Ichigo left, that doppelganger had some very cryptic things to say about Ichigo's power eventually becoming his own, making it clear that this was not just some manifestation of Ichigo's inner self, and those things he said are making a lot more sense now that we know that this was Ichigo's inner hollow. Like I was talking about last video, I assume that this all started because of the trials Urahara put him through when the Hollow Mask first formed. Was that the inception of this inner hollow inside of him? Has there always been an inner hollow? Does everybody have an inner hollow? We don't really have enough information yet, and that's a good way to scare the readers. We're just as in the dark about this as Ichigo is. It's not just Ichigo's inner hollow that's a problem though, as there are other hollows to worry about too. A pair of Arrancars arrive in the mortal world, and they're ones that are fully developed, because it turns out the Grand Fisher's own Arrancar transformation we saw was imperfect or incomplete, and Kubo had a subtle way of showing it too. With the Grand Fisher, his face beneath was peeking through the mostly intact mask, but with these Arrancar, their hollow masks are shattered, leaving nothing but pieces, and they've taken much more human-looking forms. Though they still have their respective holes like all hollows do, I like that those essential distinguishing hollow features are still present in some way. That's really cool, and I can't wait to see more of it because Kubo will have so many ways to play with it. And if there's one thing that Tite Kubo always nails, it's character design. And tricking me with his plot twists. But thankfully he went easy on me this time. Thank you. Also, I like how their outfits are predominantly white to clash against the Soul Reaper robes. It's a nice aesthetic and kind of a inverted look. I think it's a really good choice because these hollows are gaining Soul Reaper-like powers, so it makes sense they kind of look a little bit like Soul Reapers. There's also clearly been a massive increase in their power since becoming Arrancars, because before, hollows kind of had to go through a lot of trouble to devour souls, but now, well, they can apparently turn cities into buffets, so the arrival of these Arrancars, Ukiura and Yami, feels like an homage to Akira Toriyama in Dragon Ball Z, practically mirroring when Vegeta and Nappa landed on Earth. Two powerful new enemies arrive in a crater, one who's smaller, more dismissive, and presumably more powerful, while the other is this enormous, muscular oaf of a character who immediately goes about causing a calamity the moment that they arrive. That whole sequence brought me back to being a kid when I was terrified when the Saiyans finally showed up. These guys immediately make their presence known to everyone, and it makes it clear to the reader that our characters could be in some serious danger. And small note, but I loved that there was this one singular panel of Ishin with his back turned when everyone else is sensing the Arrancar's spiritual pressure. After the events of the last few chapters, we know that he can feel it too, but I love that we don't focus on that. It's just a fleeting moment where we don't even see his face. As far as most characters are concerned, he's just the same old, innocent, oblivious dad. But we know better now. And Kon knows better too, but he was sworn to secrecy. And speaking of family secrets, in the middle of all of this happening, Ichigo's sister Karin confronts him and tells him that she knows he's a Soul Reaper. We've seen that Karin has been more spiritually aware than most, but this is the first time that she's directly talking to her brother about it. And while he tries to deny it at first, he eventually has to reveal it when he goes to try to face the new threat. And also, just kind of want to mention too that his friend Tatsuki is also becoming more spiritually aware, and she's seeing all kinds of things. So there's more and more characters kind of getting wrapped up into all of this, even inadvertently. So I'm curious to see where that goes down the road, if we're going to include more of these people into the cast, or some of them going to get powers like Chad and Orihime did. I don't know. It's exciting though. Another interesting thing for me was just the simple reference that Yami had been to the mortal world when he was masked. So he came as a good old-fashioned hollow before, and that really got me thinking what that must have been like. What is the mindset of a hollow when it's in that more traditional state compared to when their mask is broken? We know that some hollows sometimes seem almost feral and beast-like, but others are more intelligent. It's just interesting to think that he's been there before in a completely different form, and I wonder how the experiences contrasted for him. I also really love the blatant differences between the two Arrancars we meet. Besides the obvious physical traits, Yami's the big, loud meathead of the duo, while Ukiura is more reserved and hangs back. I talked a bit about why this trope is so effective in an earlier video, and this just shows once again that this kind of pairing when introducing antagonists is always effective. And Yami fulfills his particular role well. He seems like this big, simple obstacle to have to knock down, but Ukiura is very different. So let's get my initial impressions on him. First off, his design is great. With one look, you know exactly what kind of character this is. He's very sullen, not coming to anything that was even close to a smile even once, and he seems to be very stuck up as well. His most distinguishing quirk so far is his view of others. He's very upfront about what he thinks about people, and views most people as nothing more than trash. Yes, trash. Something that he points out frequently throughout the chapters. It both feels like this kind of hilarious gag, but also like a real, clear look at his mindset, because he really does seem to think he's superior, and it doesn't take much for him to view someone and immediately decide that they're beneath him and that they're just trash. And his whole view of the world is probably like, I imagine there aren't many people that he views as better than trash. And let me be clear, I respect Chad and Orihime for trying to intervene, but they find themselves to be outmatched pretty instantly. And it's when Orihime heals Chad that Ukiura notices that her powers are something beyond just the power to heal. And it may have something to do with time manipulation? What? Orihime is a character I haven't really spent much time talking about. I don't dislike her or anything, but most of the big storylines for her that resonated with me were very early, prior to when I started sharing these thoughts after the June 17th chapters. Her relationship with her late brother turned hollow was very tragic back then, and I enjoyed her powers manifesting in order to protect her best friend, because like Ichigo, she's all about protecting people she cares about, and her abilities reflect that. She can create shields and repel attacks, and she can heal people through what was described specifically as repelling the damage that was done to the body. So repelling the damage. She didn't get too much of a spotlight in the Soul Society arc, though notably, Mayuri was fascinated by her abilities and wanted to study her closely. And it seems like an impressive thing to actually intrigue that psychopath, and now we're seeing another person that's a bit perplexed by Orihime's powers. For me, I never really gave her abilities too much thought before. My D&D brain just chalked it up to her being the cleric healer of their adventuring party. But if there is something more going on here, if she's reversing time when she's mending wounds, there's a whole lot more potential to her abilities than I ever thought about. Unfortunately for her though, despite this, and the suggestion that Aizen might be interested in her power, but Yukiura's like, nah, just kill her. But notably, he doesn't call her trash. Probably because she has something interesting and of value to him. Thankfully, Ichigo comes to save the day, and with his Bankai, seems like he's about to stop these Arrancars and save his friends. But unfortunately, he's not in the best mental space to fight at his best. Ichigo is being hindered by his inner hollow, as it plagues his mind and tries to take control again. The strain of keeping his hollow at bay, along with the distraction it's causing, puts Ichigo at a disadvantage against Yami and puts himself and his friends in harm's way. He could have easily been killed if Urahara and Yoriichi didn't come to the rescue. We do learn that the Arrancars were only there to find Ichigo and to see if he's worth worrying about for Aizen. I don't know, it's kind of nice knowing that Aizen's passing interest in Ichigo might go a bit deeper, that maybe he really was impressed during the Soul Society arc, but after this showing, and the state that Ichigo's in, Ukiura doesn't think that he's worth Aizen's time or thought, as he and Yami leave, having completed their little scouting mission. After his inner hollow's almost fatal interruptions, which made him unable to protect his friends, Ichigo isn't feeling great. Essentially, he is feeling like trash. Sorry, had to. The fight just reinforced all of his worries and his anxieties when it comes to the hollow inside of him. He's back in that hole, and it seems like it's going to be a lot harder to pull himself out of it. Thankfully, reinforcements arrive as some familiar Soul Reapers come to the mortal world, and I love this so much. I'm a big fan of fish out of water stories, so to see these Soul Reapers show up and have to pretend to be students is just the greatest thing. Shout out to Ikaku for holding onto a sword, even if it's just a wooden one. Old habits die hard, but I love that he's just carrying it around. I hope we get a lot of Soul Reapers in the mortal world, honestly. I need to see how Kenny and Mayuri do in the streets. I love that Rukia returning to the mortal world is handled so well, and I love even more that she's the one that's able to break Ichigo out of his rut and remind him of who he is. She understands him better than most people. It was really nice getting more of them together, like the good old days, with her acting as a guide and a coach for him. But this poor unlucky Hollow though, some of his brethren are breaking their masks, gaining Zanpakutos, and turning into heartthrobs, while he's used as nothing more than a therapy tool for Ichigo to cheer up. Some people are just unlucky. Renji, Rukia, and Captain Hitsugaya give us a rundown on different types of hollows, and as a massive fan of the hollows, I am living for this. So humor me for a moment, and let me just make sure that I have a clear understanding of it all. There are 3 types of hollows, or like stages that they can become, that they can evolve into. There's Gillians, which are apparently like the Menos Grandes we've dealt with before, the really big guys. The Ajukas, if I'm pronouncing that right, which I'm probably not, and the Vasto Lordes, which are the most powerful evolution that the Hollows can turn into, which are apparently like beyond captain level when compared to Soul Reaper. I like that we're getting a little bit more lore on the Hollows and some possible directions of where they could go as enemies. Now that Ichigo is up to speed on what he's really up against and what the Hollows really can be, we need to be prepared for the inevitable attack, one that is shown to be coming when Ukiura and Yami return to Aizen. Captain Hitsugaya warned that Aizen having even 10 Vasto Lordes in his army would be really, really bad, and apparently he has twice as many as that. Yeah, that's concerning, but even more than that, it's exciting. We have some new threats to the series established, but things are looking more optimistic now. We've gotten a taste of what these fully developed Arrancar can do, and they've shown how dangerous they are, but we have a whole group of characters ready to face them. And for the moment, Rukia seems to have managed to have gotten Ichigo back on track, and I'm looking forward to whatever fight comes next. As always, thanks so much for watching, guys. I really loved these chapters. These Arrancars are pretty cool, and I'm so excited to see what the rest of them look like, all 20 of them or whatever. So, yeah, thanks so much for watching as always. Please like, comment, subscribe, and catch you guys next time. Bye.